Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is your boy Jerm, and you are tuned in to the very first edition of MRW. That is an acronym for Media Review Wednesdays. That is what I'm going to be doing every Wednesday. I'm going to try to review some type of media, whether that be a film, a song, a whole album, movie, even a book. So, first things first, I will say, if you have any type of media that you want reviewed, anybody that you know's work that you want to see someone review, let me know. Send me something on Instagram, send me something on Twitter, send me something any way you can, and I will do my best to try to put it on the list of things to review. This is something I'm going to try to make this one of my two little staples of my week, along with the weekly wrap-ups. And yeah, hopefully this can get some traction as well. Hopefully y'all enjoy these. I want to try to put people on to different little things. So I really do want to see some people just send me some stuff. Send me something that I probably wouldn't be in my radar without you letting me know about it. And I would appreciate that. But yeah, the movie we're going to talk about is Justice League. As you all know, it came out originally in 2017. Got fucking panned. Originally, it was directed by Zach Snyder. His daughter unfortunately committed suicide, and he had to step away from it. And in that little interim time, they gave it to Josh Whedon. Two different directors, two different visions. The movie just it became something else, and it really disappointed me for a while, because personally, I always loved the DC characters. I'm a huge Flash fan. I like Batman. I love Superman as well. I just love the characters and how they enter and how they just represent. They're gods. That's just always been cool to me. It's just, in Marvel, you have these characters who are real people who in a lot of ways just happen to just develop these powers or be given all these abilities. In DC, these are literal gods. Even Batman, in a way, it's mythical with him. So it was really disappointing for me personally when that original version of this film came out and they butchered it. So to see Zack Snyder get to see his full vision realized, to actually get everything he wanted in there, that was really nice to just see them do that. They sort of caved into a whole bunch of fan pressure. There was all these people going crazy on the internet. Release the Snyder Cut has been trending on Twitter, it feels like, for at least 2.5 years, so I'm sure they just got tired of that shit. But this is my review of that movie. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well if you've seen it. If not, hopefully this inspires you to go check it out. But let's go and get into that right now. Really, the movie's story in general is just so much more coherent and just, it's much better told. Everything sort of makes sense inside the movie now. There's not a whole bunch of just question marks or plot holes or things like that. There's still one pretty major sort of plot hole, and I'm gonna get to that when I start talking on the negatives. But this movie really just it's like night and day. That's the main phrase I'm gonna keep coming back to on this. It's really night and day when you're viewing this movie compared to the theater one. The characters, again, I know a lot of people have probably already mentioned this in their reviews. Cyborg and Flash steal the show. Compared to the theater version, where Cyborg was literally just sort of there, his dad didn't get any attention. It was just, he's a robot, he was a football player and everything. This movie is almost a solo movie for Cyborg and Flash. It really is. Just the amount of attention spent on them, the fact that they really did play a major part in how everything goes down. I'm not going to spoil anything, but they play a major part. So that's a much better. Wonder Woman, she wasn't a bad character in the original, but in this one, she's good. The only character who probably came out looking a little worse than they did in the original version for me is Aquaman. And a lot of the stuff that happened with Aquaman was not even his fault. That was just weird directorial choices and just like the yodeling scene. This is the only negative I'm going to talk about during the positives. It's stuff like that really just didn't have any place. But other than that, characters are well handled. Everybody in the movie does their thing. Ray Fisher, Urza Miller, they literally deserve a lot of props for this, because they really stole the show. And you can really just say the same thing when it comes to the world building. It's just, there's so much. This movie really does feel like the intro to an extended universe. When you look at Justice League, the theater version, I remember the one thing that I sort of thought coming out of it was, This feels like this movie doesn't feel earned. You compare, like, when they first tried to release it, the one with Josh Whedon, which was Josh Whedon. When they first released that one, it was so clear that not only was it just a misbungled bunch of just directors' ideas and thoughts that never really actually coalesced into something solid, you also just, it felt like they were trying to make this movie as if we should be excited for it already. Like we've already established who all these characters are, when they really had only established Superman. You had Man of Steel, you had Batman versus Superman. You can't introduce Batman in a story like that with no type of backstory, with him just, oh, Batman is also in this universe. It doesn't work like that. When you're talking about the holy trinity of DC, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, you gotta either give them all their films, or you need to, or in that group film, you have to literally go out of your way to show the origin stories of the characters that you haven't used yet. Because these characters are too, and I don't like to use this because comic book movies are made for comic book fans. So a lot of times I do feel like you should know who these characters are. You should know some of the stories. You should understand what's going on without having to have it drilled over your head. But even then, there's a bare minimum to that. They have Wonder Woman just show up. All of a sudden, she knows everybody, and she's just a big part of the story. Batman versus Superman, that didn't work. And what they did, and what Zach Snyder did, and this was really smart by him. He took a couple of, he literally separated it into chapters. And even though some people will complain about the runtime, and I'll get into that later, it gave enough breathing room for every little story arc to get handled. There is no story arc in this movie that wasn't already intended to be wrapped up in another film that I was left just wondering about. Nothing. I have all, like, it's just a well put together story. I know what Flash's motivations are. I know what Cyborg's motivations are. I know what fucking Martian Manhunter wants to do, and I didn't even know that he was going to be in the movie. Everybody is taken care of. There's no character the only character that's really missing. The only thing I'm wondering, what the fuck was up with that Green Lantern that just got randomly murdered by Darkseid? Other than that, that's it. That's it. It's well done. Character stuff is all great. Just another good part of the movie. Speaking of the world building, though, the job they did by making Steppenwolf go from this bland, boring to look at, dry character in the theater version to this melodramatic. He's melodramatic and over and just doing a whole lot the entire movie, but it works. It works so well because we're able to see him play off of another villain. I can't remember his name exactly, if it's Desaad or Assad. That character does wonders for Steppenwolf just by giving him someone to talk to. That's not a parademon. He's able to actually communicate with somebody. He's able to actually showcase some emotion, give us a reason to care about what he's doing in the film. And I can't stress it enough. I don't understand why they wanted to ignore Darkseid completely in the original theater version. It makes no sense. There's no point to it. Why would you introduce Steppenwolf? Like, watching this movie and then trying to think to myself, what did they gain by not having Darkseid in there? You're having a villain in the movie who's literally connected to him. That's his main connection. But for some reason you think, all right, we're not going to mention him at all. He's not going to show up in the flashback. It's just going to be focusing on Steppenwolf. And I'm only going to say this because I read at least twice that they got rid of Steppenwolf's, like, the way he looks in the Snyderverse. They got rid of that look because they didn't want it to be as scary looking. They didn't want a super evil villain from a comic book who's from a planet of death and destruction who wants to annihilate all life on human Earth. They didn't want him to look too scary in a comic book movie. I don't know what's going on Warner Brothers. They might be smoking a lot of crack, but they need to stop what they're doing. And I can't go on enough. It's just great character work on everybody's part. I really enjoyed Darkseid. The CGI wasn't always as good as it could be, but it was solid. It did what it needed to do. Darkseid looked great. Everything looked good. Like, it's just so much of a better movie. The cinematography too. you go from a movie that where they were forcing it to look light and everything was just sort of thrown off by that, because if you've seen Man of Steel, if you've seen Batman versus Superman, Zack Snyder does not make those lighthearted Marvel movies. And I don't want to say Marvel movies because Marvel movies are not that easily put into a box, but I really do feel like I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. When they passed on the directing role from Snyder to Whedon, that was one of the things that I really feel like they made a mistake on. They allowed him to change the entire tone, the entire look, going after something that they were trying to just be like Marvel. And the thing is, they don't need to do that. DC can be DC and we will love it. I love DC for DC. I've always loved Superman, Batman, Flash. Those are characters that you can't beat. And one thing that I really think they need to just understand, the way Zack Snyder is succeeding with these characters is he's really showing them as gods. That's an underrated aspect of the DC characters that people don't seem to understand. Superman, Wonder Woman, all of these characters are gods. These are literally demigods who just happen to play on Earth. And that is what's so intriguing, what's so eye-catching to me, at least, about these characters. And that's what I want to see in these movies. I don't want to see them necessarily just humanizing them. Of course, Superman he has a human alter ego. He's Clark Kent. Show us Clark Kent a little bit. Show us Superman being fun and being Superman that we expect and that we've seen on TV. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice the actual dramatic storytelling that Snyder was just so keen on. That's what made Man of Steel so good to me, was the fact that you had this character struggling with having this God-given power that he didn't understand or how to use. That's what made Batman vs. Superman, and a lot of people didn't like this. That's what made me enjoy the scenes of Superman in Congress having to go up and just face the judgment for just his actions, just his existence. Because in a real life situation, Superman would not be seen as some benevolent god and we would all just worship off bat. That's not how it would happen. There's a lot of people who would be afraid, who would not want to deal with this guy. And so I just really think that it's nice to see Snyder be able to really realize that vision. That is important. That's the one thing that I think people need to appreciate about this movie. This movie is a fully realized vision. It's not a Frankenstein monster like the first movie was. This is actually Snyder's vision. And honestly, if this is what his vision is, I want to see more of it. Let's talk about some of the negatives for this movie. There are not too many of them, so I shouldn't need to talk too long about this, but there's still some things that need to be noted. First things first, there's not enough Superman in this movie. This is probably a personal problem, a little nitpick of mine. I really enjoy Zack Snyder's Superman. I enjoy Man of Steel. Batman vs. Superman wasn't that great, I'm not going to lie. But I blame that more on the new additions and not focusing more on Superman by himself. I feel like the entire movie, they try to have these little scenes with Lois Lane and his mom where they're talking. I know one of them isn't actually his mom in the scene, but they have these different scenes where we're hearing so much about Superman and the way and how important he was and his impact, and it feels like once he comes back, he's sort of there for 5 minutes and he just shows up at the end after that. And that I feel like that was a little bit of a miscall. This whole trilogy, everything that's been happening across the world in this DC universe, it revolves around Superman. And so I just feel like it could have been beneficial to the movie to show a couple reactions to it. You know, Superman just came back from the dead. The entire world thought he was fucking dead. And yet he comes back. They've got all this apocalyptic stuff going on. You've got Steppenwolf. That's another thing. It feels like the world did not care that Steppenwolf was out here doing all this shit. Like, it got to the point where Batman and the rest of the Justice League have to bring Superman back from the dead. They rob his grave. Why does it feel like no one in the world acknowledges this or cares about it? That was one thing, and you know what? And this is just coming to me off the top of my head. That's one thing I do somewhat appreciate about the Whedon version of the film. It felt like the world was alive. In this movie, it does feel like, okay, there's the Justice League doing their thing, and then there's Darkseid and Steppenwolf and them. Everybody else is just, they have no agency, they have no thoughts, they have no cares in the world. Lois Lane is the only regular human that I feel like gets any type of attention. And they don't really do that great of a job with Lois Lane's parts, at least in my opinion. So yeah, that's my first nitpick. And since we are speaking on the Lois Lane parts of the movie, the introduction scene for Martian Manhunter, when he takes the form of Superman's mom to talk to her and to give her some motivation, I really just didn't care. Like, I like Martian Manhunter. It was cool when I thought about it that he's in the movie now, but why? Why now? Why in this movie you just had, like, in reality, what the fuck was he doing? They could have used him. He could have been a great big help trying to fight Steppenwolf, and he just no-showed. He showed up at the end for after Batman and them had done it all, and he just goes to Batman and is just like, I'll be there to help next time. But like, bro, what the fuck? We needed you for the first fight. If Superman didn't show up, though, they were going to die. They were going to get their ass handed to them. And yet, for some reason, Martian Manhunter would have just been chilling. Like, the world would have blown up and he would have just went back to Mars and just been done with the shit. So that was just, that really made no type of sense to me at all. That being said, though, they probably didn't need Martian Manhunter's help because Steppenwolf, he got made to look like a bitch in this movie. On pretty much every fighting scene he was in, if he was fighting a named character, he was going to take some type of an L. He got his ass whooped by Diana. He only really started to overtake her because of the parademons. He got his ass. It wasn't fair. It really was not fair what Superman did to him. And even Aquaman was giving him that work. So I understand, like I said, I understand Darkseid. They make it clear he's the real big bad. He's the one you need to be worried about and scared of. But if you know he's not going to show up in this movie, would it kill you to sort of protect Steppenwolf a little bit? Don't let him be a complete bitch. Don't let him go out there and just get made to look a fool of every time. During the scene with the Amazons where he's chasing after them, it's just like there's certain points where it was like, come on, he can look a little stronger. Once again, Whedonverse, they at least tried to showcase him looking strong. They didn't even do a good job of that per se, but at least they tried. So that was one thing Snyder could have done better. If you're not going to have Darkseid show up and immediately start fighting, don't make his stand-in look like a complete pushover, because then it's just like, all right, if Steppenwolf's such a little pussy, why should I be worried about Darkseid? We cut off Steppenwolf's head, threw it to Darkseid, and all he does is just stand on it. And I'm supposed to be afraid of him? We got Superman, bitch. Last two things that were really sort of dumb to me. I didn't understand the Aquaman scenes sometimes. I felt like some of those were just, not that they weren't needed, because it is good. Like I said, Aquaman, like every character deserved their arc in this movie, especially if they weren't shown prior to it. Aquaman deserved his. Cyborg and Flash definitely needed theirs. But like, just some of the scenes with him, it was just like, what? Why'd you put this in there? The yodeling scene, I already talked about that. What was the point of that? She sniffs his sweater. What does that mean? I know there's a lot of symbolism in this man's movie, so I'm trying to think, maybe there's something that went over my head. What is the point of that? Then you got the scene where he's just walking out of the bar and goes into the ocean, and it's just like a slow-mo scene. For what? For what? Why is he? Why were there so many slow-mo scenes that didn't need to be slow-mo? If I hear the Amazon yell when Wonder Woman does anything one more time, I'm going to get mad. What the fuck? So that, and my very last thing, Darkseid he shouldn't have had to be reminded where Earth was. He's this benevolent ruler. He's taken over different parts of the galaxy. He's ruling over planets, destroying them all. And the one planet that whoops that ass and sends him back where he came from, he forgets about it. That ain't a good villain. That is not a good villain. That's not how you get me to take him seriously. What were you thinking on that choice? I guess it sort of makes sense to sort of give some type of credence, and if you don't think about it too hard, you can sort of ignore it. But no, come on now. Darkseid wouldn't forget that he got his ass whooped there. I'm not sure if there was any way for him to know that the anti-life equation was on the planet, but there is definitely no way he would just completely forget where they were. So, yeah, that did not go over my head. So in conclusion, this movie was pretty fucking solid. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being a radioactive turd from Chernobyl and 10 being Flex, the song by Playboi Carti, I would say this is a solid 9 for me. I will say a part of that is just because the original was so fucking bad in comparison. Like, I used to think that movie was at least a 6 or a 7. I'm a little bit of a DC fanboy, that's what I'll blame it on, but I really thought this movie was not as terrible as people thought it was. But you actually see this one, and I really am wondering, how did Warner Brothers allow that to get released? How? How did they look at that Frankenstein-ass piece of shit movie and say, yeah, let's never release the Snyder Cut? It's really petty at this point. I can't think of any other reason other than they just don't like Zack Snyder. And you know what? Fuck Warner Brothers, because at least Zack Snyder has a vision. So, yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 9. It's a real solid movie. If you have HBO Max, watch it. If you don't, this is worth getting it just to watch. I'll say that. I'll say hopefully it's the free trial you get, because once you get it, I'm not going to tell you, that's a lot of money for a streaming service. I'm really cheap like that, and plus there's too many of these streaming services already. But this one, it is worth getting it for. 9 out of 10 movie, good movie. Favorite scene is probably, I think my favorite scene is the Flash's slow-mo. I know I just said I didn't like some of the slow-mo scenes, but his was done very well. I love the way they did it. It built up. I don't know if this is just a little nerd thing I learned. The girl he saved is actually going to be his love interest in his solo movie that comes out next year. So I love the fact that they included her in that. That was great to see. My least favorite scene, once again, the slow-mos. The Aquaman one had no purpose. He's walking across a boardwalk. He drinks a beer, and all of a sudden he just disappears into a raging thing of water. Why? That's how I felt about Justice League, though, the Snyder version. Go and watch it yourself. If not, I understand. You probably just don't like superhero movies then. But hopefully y'all have a good rest of your day. Peace. Thanks again for listening. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Jermster. On Twitter with 1_, on Instagram with 3. Also be sure to like and follow on whatever listening platform you're using to hear me out. And other than that, have a great and wonderful rest of your day.